people I know who claim to be an anarchist have not even read this book. Um, and it's quite an important uh, foundation for anarchist theory, um,
Well,
which always surprises me.
yeah, and that points to the main thing, which is at the time Kropotkin was alive, the difference between a communist and an anarchist, or a Marxist and an anarchist, was mainly about who you organized. The anarchists were concerned with organizing the peasantry, and the communists were concerned with organizing the factory workers. But as we saw in China, it was the peasantry that laid the basis for the communist revolution. Mao said, "Well, these may not be proletarian, factory workers. We are bringing them proletarian ideology with which to get their freedom." And that was the basis of Trotsky's discounting of the Chinese Revolution, was because it was mainly peasants. And he said the peasantry is a class without a future that is not revolutionary. So that's particularly interesting. But the conquest of bread, or the bread book, has absolutely nothing to do with the worldview of BreadTube. I mean, I don't see the connection. I mean, the conquest of bread is about kind of organizing a more voluntary socialist society to raise living standards, to eradicate poverty, and to make sure everyone has what they need. It's basically an anarchist. It's very similar to Marxism, an anarchist version of that. What BreadTube believes, generally, I go after three particular positions that they hold. The first position is that they don't seem to understand the difference between capitalism and socialism. They think that this is defined purely by the inequality between employers and employees, right? That capitalism is factory owners and factory workers, and that socialism is when you have worker cooperatives. And they fail to understand that that capitalism is a system of production organized for profit, and that simply organizing capitalism with workers as owners, right, and production for profit, where the workers get a share of the profits, does not eliminate that problem, right? That the problem of capitalism is that it's production for profit, and that you need a rationally planned, centrally planned economy, eliminating the rule of profit, to get beyond the horrors of capitalism. And that's the point of chapter 2 of the book. The other thing is that modern capitalism is not, it's become kind of a meme on my lives, but modern capitalism is not a pencil factory, right? Modern capitalism is not an individual factory owner exploiting an individual group of factory workers. Modern capitalism is giant cartels and big monopolies and banks that dominate the world. Modern capitalism is huge corporations that stretch their tentacles all over the globe. And Lenin wrote a whole book about this called Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. And that if you're simply going around talking about factory owners and factory workers, you're kind of missing the point. And also that one of the aspects of capitalism that, Karl Marx talks a lot about is that, the tendency of the falling rate of profit, and the actual involvement of workers in the point of production is constantly decreasing in capitalism, right? And, we have a big service sector now. We have all kinds of jobs. There's all kinds of working class people who don't sell their labor on a factory floor and are not involved in creating surplus value at the point of production. So those factory floor analogies, they're correct largely when Karl Marx wrote about them, and they're correct to this day, but technology is making that less and less a factor in the economy. But we still have an owning class, and we still have a working class, and that owning class still owns huge factories and banks and oil wells, and they operate them to make profits, not for social use, not for what's good for society, but in order to make profits. And it's that is the problem. Capitalism is irrational, right? It's production for profit, not for social use. Socialism is when you have a rationally organized economy that doesn't have the recurring problems that capitalism has, like overproduction, like technology eliminating jobs, like living standards dropping as technology increases, like poverty amid plenty, right? And that profits in command is the basis of the difference, and that capitalism is the rule in our time of huge multinationals and corporations. Capitalism in our time is imperialism, and that socialism is when the means of production function for the good of society. This is basic Marxism, but BreadTube has distorted that. Now, their model, which is that, as Vosch has said many, many times, that socialism is just everything being exactly as it is now, except every company is a worker cooperative. That doesn't solve the problems of capitalism. Imagine that Raytheon or Boeing or General Electric were a worker cooperative. right? Then all the workers would be lobbying Congress to go to war all the time because they would want their profits to increase. They would be getting a share of the profits, right? Imagine that the private prisons, the guards were all, shareholders in it. Well, they would be lobbying and actively trying to imprison as many people as possible to increase their share of the profits, right? Imagine that big pharma companies were cooperatively owned. Then all the employees would want as many people to get addicted to opioid medications as possible to increase their profits. The problems of production organized for profit, not for social use, don't go away simply by making the workers part owners. And furthermore, the capitalists have thought of this already. Many places you will see profit sharing schemes implemented simply because they want to make capitalism more efficient. It used to be that employers in factories would pay piece wages. They wouldn't pay per hour. They would just pay you, if you worked in a tire factory, they'd pay you for how many tires got produced. And it was because of communist organizing and the labor movement that in 1938, they passed something called the Fair Labor Standards Act that said you can't do that. You have to pay a minimum hourly wage, right? And the idea that workers just get a share of the profits, right? That doesn't necessarily make conditions better for workers. Now, the bread tube crowd would say they want total workers' democracy. Every worker has an equal share. Okay, well, first of all, we don't see that in a lot of worker cooperative places. Mondragon, for example, they often, just export, and hire out labor from Latin America and places like that. But even if you did, you still wouldn't get rid of the problem of production for profit.
Right. And Vosh has recently proved you right in this book recently with that clip that there's this clip going around where he is basically saying that if the United States pulls out of these countries that they've devastated economically and underdeveloped, then China would come in and they'll
their boots on the ground. I was like, girl.
And
you